Hi guys, I'm Chris and welcome to my channel. Today I would like to talk to you about the books that I read in November. I ended up reading a total of 20 books. If you see me look down, it's because I'm looking at my notes because that's a lot of books to remember and a lot of information, and I want to make sure I get everything straight. So I read 5 5-star books, 8 4-star books, 4 3-star books, and 3 2-star books. I didn't have any DNFs and I didn't have any 1-star books, so not a bad month of reading. First up, let's talk about the Twisted Tales series by Liz Braswell and Elizabeth Lim. So, the concept of the Twisted Tales is to take classic Disney stories and give them a bit of a twist. So we'll start with the first book in the series is based on Aladdin, and it's called A Whole New World. The twist in this story is, what if Jafar was the first one to summon the genie? This obviously creates a completely different story. I don't remember the finer details of Aladdin because it's been a while since I've seen it, but I remembered enough that the story was familiar. It was quite interesting to see Aladdin and not have him interact with the genie, because if memory serves, a big chunk of that story is Aladdin and the genie's kind of budding friendship. In this one, that obviously doesn't happen. And it creates a completely different landscape and brings the story in a completely different direction. I gave this one 4 stars. The second story in the series is about Sleeping Beauty, and it's called Once Upon a Dream. The twist in this story is, what if the Sleeping Beauty never woke up? Now, this one, I'm not sure I've ever actually seen the Disney movie, but I feel like I do know the premise of the story just from growing up. I've heard it. I know the basics. This one I didn't like as much. I felt like the execution wasn't as well done as I would have liked it to be, and the ending wasn't what I was looking for. However, I still gave this book 3 stars. The third book in the series is based on Beauty and the Beast, and it's called As Old as Time. The twist in this book is, what if Belle's mother cursed the Beast? I'm quite familiar with Beauty and the Beast. I think this is, out of the ones I read, the one I'm most familiar with. And I know that Belle's mother doesn't feature in the original story. So this was quite the twist. I liked this one a lot. It had a bit of a dual perspective. There were chapters that were told from Belle's point of view, and there were also chapters that showed her mother and her father before she was born, before her mother and father even got together, and showed the journey and the events that were set into motion that led to Belle's mom cursing the Beast. That gave it a completely fresh perspective that I wasn't expecting, and I really, really liked it, and it actually gets a lot darker than I expected it to. I gave this one 5 stars. I loved it. And lastly, I read a Mulan retelling called Reflection. Now, I've never seen Mulan, so I have no idea what happens in the original story. So this was like a completely brand new story for me. The twist in Mulan is, what if Mulan had to travel to the underworld? Now, again, I have no idea how this plays out in the original story, but I thought it was quite interesting to see her navigating the underworld and having to pretend to be a man and trying to figure out how to return to the regular world. I really liked getting to know these characters because, again, they're brand new characters for me. Like, I've obviously heard of them, but beyond what was shown on the TV show Once Upon a Time, which in itself was almost like a twisted tale. I don't know too much more about Mulan, so brand new story, and I really liked it. I gave this one 4 stars. Continuing with the theme of retellings, I read Grounded, The Adventures of Rapunzel. This is the first book in the Time series, and it is obviously a Rapunzel retelling, but it also intersects with Jack from Jack and the Beanstalk. Basically, Rapunzel lives in her tower with Mother Gothel, who she only calls Witch in this book, and the witch has convinced her that the world is full of evil and danger, and she's just safer spending her time in her tower. So when Jack shows up one day, she's scared of him, and eventually he tricks her out of her tower, and they end up going on a quest. This allows Rapunzel to see the world as it truly is. And while maybe Witch was right about some things, and how the world does have evil in it and does have some not so nice people in it, she also learns that she wasn't being entirely truthful. And it's quite interesting to see Rapunzel grow on her journey. This was a 3-star book for me, and it looked like it was going to stay that way until the very end. And the way this book wraps up bumped it up to a 4 for me. I actually really like this book, and I'm quite looking forward to the next book in the series. Continuing with the retellings, I read Beauty by Robin McKinley. This is obviously a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and this is quite different. So, in this book, Beauty is actually the character's name, and she has 2 older sisters, and they live with their father, and how their father is treated is very, very different, and the way Beast intersects with Beauty and her family is very, very different. And basically, her father meets him just like in the other book, and he ends up being able to go home, and basically one of his daughters has to go back, and Beauty volunteers herself. And it creates a completely different journey of how the classic Beauty and the Beast story plays out. It's quite different. I gave this one 3 stars. I liked it, but it wasn't my favorite. And I obviously, having read another Beauty and the Beast retelling this month, preferred that one, but this one isn't bad either if you guys want to check it out. Next up, I read the To All the Boys I Loved Before series, and I gave each of these books 2 stars. So if you don't know, these books are about Lara Jean, and she writes letters to all the boys she's loved. And she never has any intention of the boys seeing them. They're just for her, and they end up getting mailed, and the boys obviously read them, and she has to deal with the fallout from that. So I really liked the characters and the family dynamics and some of the friendships in the book, but I was not into the romance. I was not a fan of who Lara Jean chose to be with, and that kind of ruined this for me because these are romance books and there's a lot of emphasis on the romances, and since I wasn't into the romance, these didn't really measure up for me. So I gave them each 2 stars. The last one was actually my favorite because of the plot that had nothing to do with the romance, like it was outside of the romance, and I enjoyed that, but they just weren't for me. However, they are actually really easy to read, so if romance is your thing, these might be something you like. In that vein, I also read Cafe by the Sea by Jenny Colgan, and just like with the To All the Boys I Loved Before series, I wasn't a fan of the romance in this one. However, the characters and the family dynamic was way more interesting in this book, so I enjoyed this one a lot more. I'm not sure if I'll read the rest of the books in this series or when I'll read them, but I did enjoy the family dynamics. So This book is about a woman named Flora, and she's required by her job to go back to the Scottish Isle that she left years ago and hasn't returned to, and deal with her family. By being there, she's obviously forced to catch up with her family and some of the goings on in the Isle where she lived. She's in love with her boss, and she's kind of got to figure out what she wants from life. Like, she does a lot of introspection when she gets home and really examines things. And that point, like, that part of the story I really, really liked. And it's really, again, an easy read. But I just wasn't into the romance. So I don't know if I'll continue it, but I really did like the family dynamics. Next up, I have Firefly Lane and Homefront. So, Firefly Lane and Homefront are by Kristen Hanna. She has become one of my new favorite authors this year. In, I think, January, I read The Nightingale, which is about two sisters who live in Germany-occupied France when Hitler's in power, and that is probably my favorite book that I've read this year. And these ones were also really, really good. So in this one, it's about two women named Kate and Tully. And it starts in 1974 when they're teenagers and they first meet, and follows their friendship over the next 30 years. So Kate just wants a normal life and to get married and have kids, whereas Tully just wants to be loved. She was abandoned by her mom at a young age and grows up with her grandma, and her mom flits in and out of her life. She shows up randomly, but it's never really about connecting with her daughter. And during all of this, these two girls form an extremely strong friendship. This friendship is very important to the both of them, and it shows in everything they do. And there comes a point in the story where their friendship is in danger. Something happens that potentially jeopardizes their friendship, and you have to see both Kate and Tully navigate that issue and how it affects their friendship and how things play out from there. Homefront is about Michael and Jolene, whose marriage is kind of on the rocks. And they have two girls, and just as their marriage is falling apart, Jolene, who's in the military, gets deployed. And Michael, who is a bit of a workaholic, is now required to basically be a single parent to his girls, who are extremely close to their mom, while their mom is over fighting a war. The youngest doesn't quite understand where her mom is. She just misses her. She just wants her to come home. And Michael has to deal with that, while also regretting a lot of how things played out before Jolene left. Because the reality is he knows she might not come home. When Jolene does come home, she's changed. She's seen and experienced things that change you, and she has to navigate her life. And Michael and Jolene both learn during this experience how important their family is to them, so they really must fight for their family. This book, like every other Kristen Hanna book, has made me cry. I gave both this and Firefly Lane 5 stars. I totally recommend you check them out. They're amazing books. Next up, I read the first 2 books in the Lady Astronaut series by Mary Robinette Kowal. This series starts in 1952 when a meteorite hits the east coast of the United States and sets into motion events that will most likely make the Earth inhabitable. So this really accelerates the space program because there are people who realize if we can't fix what the meteorite has caused, then we need someplace to go, or it'll be the end of the human race. So the space program is rapidly accelerated because they realize that they need to colonize the moon. And So we follow a former WASP pilot and mathematician named Elma York. So there weren't really computers back then. That was still something that was being developed. So they needed humans to do the math, because obviously if you're going to be launching people into space, there are a lot of scientific calculations, and Elma is one of those people. She is working for the space program, and when it comes to the point where they start to launch people into space, she wants to be one of those people that gets to pilot a rocket into space, despite the fact that there's resistance from those in charge to send women into space. So I gave the first book, The Calculating Stars, 5 stars, and I gave the second book in the series, The Faded Sky, 4 stars, and that kind of continues, The Faded Sky continues the story. And it is really, really fascinating to see how much that changes and how different life would play out if something like that had happened. And trying to get across to people how important it is that we have options, because while we can work on trying to contain the damage that this meteorite caused, the odds are nothing we do is going to change the fact that the Earth will eventually cease to be a place where we can survive. But the general public doesn't really understand that or grasp that, due to the fact that it is so scientific. Like, the math and the science behind it is hard for the everyday person to understand. So that is a bit of a battle, keeping in investments into the program, and it is interesting to see how the program develops with all of the kind of blowback that happens in these stories. Next up is the Aaron Blake series by Cheryl Scarborough. So I have the first book, To Catch a Killer, which I gave 4 stars, and the second book, To Right the Wrongs, which I gave 5. In this series, we follow Aaron. As a toddler, Aaron survived 3 days next to the body of her murdered mother. This series takes place 14 years later, when she is at the center of another murder, this time of her biology teacher. Circumstances cause her to believe that her mother's murder and the murder of her teacher are connected. So she starts looking into both her mom's murder and the teacher's murder with the help of her 2 friends and her crush, who happens to be a suspect, along with Erin herself, in the murder of her teacher. The reason this book gets 4 stars is because I pegged who I thought had done it, and killed her teacher, and I never really wavered from that. And when I'm reading my thrillers, I like there to be a little bit of uncertainty, and I like it when they make me second guess, or when they can completely bamboozle me. That's even better. And so the second book got 5 stars for just that. I had no idea who did it, and I don't really want to get into the details of this one, because obviously there are spoilers just in the synopsis for this book, for book 1. So I don't want to get into that, but I will tell you, in this book, I had no idea. They kept me second guessing right up until the end. But there are events that are set into motion and mentioned in book 1 that create the storyline for book 2. These are both really, really good. Next up, I had a reread. I reread Two for the Dough by Janet Ivanovich. This is the second book in the Stephanie Plum series. I read these books, well, some of them. Obviously there are a lot of them, and a lot of them have come out since I kind of fell off the series. So I started reading the series like 10 years ago. So it's been a very long time since I've read the beginning of the series, and I didn't like it as much as I did during my first read through. I gave this one 3 stars. My bookish tastes have also changed a lot, so that doesn't surprise me that I didn't like it as much as I did when I first read it. So if you don't know the premise, Stephanie Plum is a bounty hunter. Well, she tries to be a bounty hunter. She's working for her cousin's bail bonds company, and she doesn't really know what she's doing. And she's still kind of learning the ropes in the second one, so this is kind of a twist on the, like, detective trope. In this one, the suspect she's trying to collar, who has skipped out on his bail, is Kenny Makuzo, and he shot his best friend. She is also racing Jersey cop Joe Morelli, who is trying to track down Kenny, and is also a distant relative of Kenny. And if Joe tracks him down, then Stephanie doesn't get paid, and she needs the money. So, one of the things I love about these books is the cast of characters. It's so colorful. Like, her grandmother is one of the funniest characters, and she plays a big part in the books, and I love reading about her. So, like, there are definitely some laugh out loud moments, and if you like the kind of, like, detective genre, even though this is a bit of a twist on it, then you might really love this book and this series. It's just not as much my cup of tea as it used to be. So, if it's your thing, then definitely this is worth checking out and giving a shot. Next up, I have The Union Street Bakery by Mary Ellen Taylor. So, this is the first book in the Union Street Bakery series, and I gave this one 4 stars. So, in this book, Daisy McCrae has lost her job and returns home to help run her family's bakery with her 2 sisters. The interesting twist on this is that Daisy was adopted. She was left as a 3-year-old in this bakery, and the owners of the bakery decided to adopt her. Daisy's life is kind of in shambles, and she feels like she still doesn't quite fit in with her family, and she has no idea what happened to her mom, her birth mom, and her birth dad, and why her mom just chose to leave her there, and this really affects who she is and how she reacts to situations and interacts with people. Shortly after she returns, an elderly customer dies and leaves her a journal, which leads her to some interesting discoveries, and it is unexpected how this journal really changes Daisy's life in a lot of ways. And there's even a bit of a supernatural touch in this one with some ghosts. And I found this book really easy to read, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of the story. There's a touch of romance, but that's not even the main focus at all. It's really about Daisy and her figuring out her life and refinding her place in her family after she's been gone for so long, because she didn't live in the town she grew up in when she was working at the job she got let go from at the start of the story. So I love the family dynamics. I love how different her and her sisters are, and how they each bring something to the table when it comes to running this bakery. And I gave this one 4 stars. I really liked it. Next, we'll go with The Perilous Sea by Sherry Thomas. This is book 2 in the Elemental trilogy. So if you haven't read book 1, this is obviously about people who can do elemental magic. And there is a prophecy that the next great mage will be born and will be able to take down an evil and powerful mage who rules the realm called the Bane. And Prince Titus is supposed to help this mage fulfill their destiny. And so the mage in question that he believes is the one that has the power to take down the Bane is named Iolanthe Seaborn. And this is a continuation of their journey. And I liked this one a lot better than book 1. Book 1 is a bit of a slow start before it sucks you in. But this one had me right from the get-go. So you're seeing 2 different time periods. One as current day, and one is 10 weeks ago, explaining kind of the backstory of how the characters you're following ended up here. And there is not a slow moment in this book. It is just from the word go. And I really, 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 really liked that. So I gave this one 4 stars. And at the end, it leaves you in a spot where you just want to pick up book 3. So you can expect to see that one in my December wrap-up. And the last book I read in November is Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman. I read this with Murphy Napier's Patreon Buddy Reads. And basically, Neil Gaiman tells the story of the Norse myths. He's not doing like a retelling and putting his own twist on it. He's literally looked at all the different versions of these Norse myths and tried to compile the most accurate versions of these stories that he can. I listened to the audiobook while reading the physical book, and it really enhanced my enjoyment of these stories. I didn't have to worry about stumbling over weird names of people and places and stuff. And Neil Gaiman really brings the character and the world to life with his voice acting. I highly recommend you get the audiobook if you can, because it's just amazing. And I went into it not knowing much about Norse mythology. And I really, really liked getting to learn about these myths. And I liked how he put them together and the order in which he told the stories. And I gave that one 4 stars. So these are the books I read in November. If you've read any of them and want to talk to me, comment down below. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye!